They say if you enjoy a manga by an author, you have a high probability of enjoying their other works. Blood on the Track is a manga by Shuuzou Oshimi that made my top 10 manga of all time. So I was a bit taken back when I judged a book by its cover and decided to check out one of his other works, Happiness. Welcome to the GTP. My name is Scott and my goal is to help you find great experiences for yourself and your family. And when it comes to the manga Happiness, it was an experience, but I wouldn't call it a great one. I know I'm spoiling the review just a little bit, but I was a little unhappy while reading this vampire manga, Happiness. One thing that's great about manga is that it truly is something for everyone. Whether you're looking for a pirate adventure, going into outer space, coming of age, romance, true crime, mysteries and sense of wonder, there are so many beautiful stories out there, and this is just one take on the story Happiness. I'm aware that some people, after this review, the things I say will not bother them, and they're going to check out this series, and they may actually thoroughly enjoy this series. Me, on the other hand, I'm coming through the perspective as a parent, so I'm seeing things through a different lens, and this manga just was not for me. And that's okay. There's gonna be manga that I recommend that you may check out that is not for you, and that's alright as well. This is just one person's take and impression on the manga series Happiness. So let's dive into a manga review to give you more constructive feedback on my thoughts when it comes to this series Happiness. So what is the story Happiness all about? The manga Happiness is about a boy who's constantly picked on. He's a bit of a pushover and bullied at school. Late one night, while walking the streets alone, ends up being bitten by a vampire that gives him the choice to die or to become like her. The boy chooses to live, not fully understanding what he is signing up for, as he is now awakened with a new sensation for blood. Something I do appreciate with the author's works is, yes, if you take the story as a literal sense, it is a vampire story. If you are able to pull back the curtain, if you're able to dive deeper into the layers, it's really dealing with adolescence. It's dealing with kids as they're growing up and trying to figure life out. It's dealing with kids when they make consequences. What are going to be the results of those consequences? In adolescence, how do you deal with coming of age? How do you deal with friends? How do you deal with being rejected by society? How do you handle when you just don't quite fit in, but you want to fit in anyways? How do you move on through out of high school and then finally hopefully make it to something you do want to do later on? So what did I think about the overall story of Happiness? The first pro I have with the overall story, it's not too wordy, similar to Shuuzou's other works. It is definitely a fast read. Before you know it, you're already done with the first volume and you're ready to read the second. And I was actually surprised as I could finish each volume within 20 to 30 minutes of the whole entire 10-volume series. This is not your typical vampire story. It was actually the most unique story I have read when it comes to vampires. It's nothing like Van Helsing, it's nothing like Vampire D. Hunter, nothing like Tokyo Ghoul, nothing like the story Blade. It was definitely a lot different, and that may be good or bad depending upon your perspective when reading this manga. The story did not go anywhere I expected. It felt like the vampire part was more of a mask, very surface level. When moving on deeper, it is about death, illness, mental health, and you are following multiple characters. One who struggles to fit in with society, another one who is bullied, another with mental illness, another with a difficult upbringing, one who struggles with the loss of a family member. And there were a few moments I was actually completely surprised on where the author was taking the story without going into spoilers. Usually by a couple volumes of a story, you usually have some sense of direction, and in this manga, even after volume 3, I was still lost. And now I love a story with many twists and turns. I love stories that go places I didn't expected, but typically at the end of the journey, I say, wow, that was an incredible ride. That was an incredible experience. I went to places I didn't want to go to, But at the end of the day, I'm so glad I went there, where instead with happiness, I felt like after I got to the destination, I realized it's somewhere I never wanted to be in the first place. The manga does start to pick up on volume 4, and by volume 5, I was reading at a faster pace as I actually was slightly curious what was going to happen next. Now I want to go through just a minor spoiler, so if you're not into that, you might just want to click on to the next chapter. But if not, I do have one minor spoiler I did appreciate of a direction the author did take with the story. Speaking of Tokyo Ghoul, early on in the story of Tokyo Ghoul, the main character almost gives into the temptation of feeding on someone he loves. In this story, the author actually explored the consequences of those actions when one of the characters does end up giving into the temptation and takes the life of someone they do care about because of that thirst for blood. So let's talk about the main character of the manga Happiness. As I said prior, the main character is kind of a pushover, more like a walking doormat that people constantly take advantage of. He's very sensitive, he's not too confident in himself, nor does he really try to stand up for himself at first. And it could be that I'm missing something and the character is more complex than I realized, but I actually felt kind of sad for the main character. It reminded me very similar to Evangelion, as he was a character that was kind of there and didn't really push the overall narrative and sometimes felt more whiny and complainy than actually pushing the narrative forward. So what about the additional cast of characters? And this is something I did find was a bit positive with the story Happiness. This is interesting as at times you do not feel there's one main character overall, but 3. One being the main character I previously mentioned, another a girl who feels out of place in society and still grieving the loss of a loved one, and one who struggles with the consequences of his actions. So that's the main character, and then the other kind of main characters of the story. Let's actually talk about what are some life lessons that we can take from the manga Happiness. The first lesson is early on in the story is to be careful who you choose to be your friends. One of the reasons one of the main characters is a bully is because he is friends with others who act that way himself. He did not start out as a bully. When this character is no longer considered to be part of the group, he becomes bullied himself by those same so-called friends that were with him before. Show me your friends, I'll show you your future. The people you surround yourself with today are shaping you, whether you realize or not, to the person you will become later in life. So spend time with people you aspire to be. Not like one of the characters who is a bully himself, and then when he's cast out of the group, instead now he's being bullied from the bullies. His character, he didn't start out as being mean to others, but when he surrounded himself with people that weren't really good characters, he ended up becoming a bad actor and a bad character himself. So it is wise, it is smart on who you choose to spend time with. And those who are spending time, are you influencing them for the better? Or are they influencing you for the better? And if not, are they taking you down a path you don't want to go? Or you realize you're not the person you want to become? You may need to ask the question, are these the type of people I should be associating myself with? We each should be around people that are going to help support us, that can help encourage us, that we can love them when times are tough, that they can love when times are tough for them. We all need each other. And those people who are bad actors, those bullies, yes, they need good people to hopefully come alongside them and that can help them. But if those good people that come alongside and help them, if they end up instead getting to become corrupt, instead of come along helping side them, they become bullies themselves, all that's doing is making the cycle worse. The second life lesson we can take from Happiness is that our actions do have consequences. Just like we saw with one of the characters who was bullying others, the consequences of those actions was when he was no longer part of the group, all of a sudden his friends started, so-called friends, started bullying him. Those were the consequences from his actions. All of a sudden there weren't really as many people that wanted to help come alongside and support him after he was such a scumbag and mean to other people. So what about the artwork? Shuuzou has a very unique art style, and you can feel the agony in some of the panels as you watch characters deal with the consequences of their decisions. This series does have some of the best looking manga covers I have seen. The artwork is very interesting, and at moments I felt as if the author was trying to break the fourth wall, asking me to take a deep breath and think about what was I experiencing. Shuuzou Oshimi has a very unique art style that you're not going to get anywhere else. It's very similar to his other works of Flowers of the Evil and Blood on the Tracks. There are times that you're going to flip a page as this is a fast read, and then just looking at the artwork you just stop. It's almost like the story is staring at you and asking you to reflect on what you're reading. And I think that's something very powerful and unique that I haven't really seen another manga artist be able to replicate. So what are some cons, maybe a little bit of rants that I have with Happiness? And my first con I have is very early in the beginning of the story. The family is watching the news and they see that a person in their neighborhood was just murdered recently. After this, the child says, "Hey, I'm gonna go ahead and return a movie." And the parent says, "It's 11:30 at night," but the child goes anyway. What parent in their right mind, especially after watching that a murder has taken place in your neighborhood, is going to let your child out at 11:30 at night to drop off a movie? Who cares about the late due? It made no sense whatsoever. This would not happen. And in volume 3 on chapter 7, there's another character who goes home and his mom is there, and when his mom speaks to him, he tells her to shut the hell up. And then her mom just takes it. What parent in their right mind would just stand there and take it as their child comes home with 2 more friends and tell their mom to shut the hell up, and she's just going to sit there and listen? She's going to let him continue on. Another con I have is, in the story, not only does this happen once but twice, is there are some teenagers that are getting, let's just say, hot and heavy together. And while they're getting hot and heavy together, the phone rings. And what do they do when the phone rings? Do they just leave it off to the side, continue their business? No, of course not. They end up stopping what they're doing. "Oh babe, hold on a sec, the phone's ringing. Let me go ahead and pick this up and see what's going on." "What? You need help?" "Right away." Hang up the phone and then they take off. That would not happen. I can't imagine, as these teenagers are going hot and heavy, that as the phone is ringing, they stop what they're doing to pick up the phone. I'm assuming they would finish what they're doing. Maybe they're bored. Maybe it wasn't as hot and heavy as I was at least seeing in the manga myself, to really pick up the phone. The story could have not even had that in it and would have made it better. They could have just 2 teenagers hanging out together, watching TV, maybe a movie. Maybe the guy has his, arm around the girl. Girl's cuddling with a guy. "Oh, hey, my phone's ringing. Let me go and check and see what's going on." "Oh, what? You need help?" "On my way." But really? We need to get hot and heavy and somehow the phone ringing is enough to interrupt what we're doing to pick it up? Just made no sense. And another con I had was one of the characters, as he goes back to school, as he's turning into a vampire and now he has a thirst for blood, he senses blood out in the open from none other than a girl on her period. And it's just kind of gross. Like, really gross. I get the vampire thing, when there's a cut open, that they sense the blood, they have a desire for blood. But did we really need to go down that path? I was more disturbed and gross, and I felt kind of ill when I was reading that section of it. And this is a minor con, and it may not make sense to most people, or many don't care about this, but some of these volumes literally had over 17 pages of advertisement. I understand you're flipping through a manga, it has 1 or 2 pages of advertisement, maybe 3 or 4, maybe 5, heck, even 10? We're getting kind of bored of here. But as you flip through some of these mangas, I don't know if they're just looking for, make sure they could have a certain page count, but really, do we need 17 pages of advertisements of different manga that I could read besides this happiness. So let's go ahead and talk about the age rating for the manga. If you could not tell already, this story is definitely not for kids. Heavy adult content, fan service, underage drinking, cursing. If it wasn't for this review, I'm not sure I actually would have continued reading the story. And some of the panels were kind of disturbing. As I was flipping through some of the pages, I actually caught myself making a ugh face as I was going through it. So let's go ahead and talk about the GTP rating for happiness. And I'm actually going to give this manga a 4 out of 10. The overall story is asking, what is happiness when dealing with unfavorable conditions? How do you find happiness in seeing friends? How do you have happiness going to college? How do you find happiness getting married, finding work, when dealing with mental illness? How do you find happiness with struggling with grief? How do you find happiness when feeling outcasted from society? And this is a story I do not recommend when it comes to trying to answer those questions. As someone like myself who dealt with unfavorable conditions growing up, very poor, sometimes I didn't know where my next meal was going to be. I had a younger sibling that was killed when I was very young. I definitely had some very poor and hard conditions growing up. Similar to some of the characters in the story, feeling like an outcast of society, not really sure where I fit in. And the answer to that question is surrounding yourself, or at least having some group of people who do care about you. And if it wasn't for a few people that came alongside and poured into me in my life, saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, I'm not sure I would be where I am today. So that could be your family, it could be your friends, it could be a local community, it could be a local church, it could be professional counseling. When we are dealing with unfavorable conditions, the best way we can go through those things is not alone. We truly need each other. We truly need a community. No one is meant to deal with life alone. You are going to deal with some unfavorable conditions growing up. That's just part of life. But when that happens, make sure you're not going through those unfavorable conditions alone. If you could not tell, I was not a fan of the manga Happiness. In fact, something very rare, and it's only the second time I've ever done this, is this manga will actually be leaving my collection. This is also the first time I've given an unfavorable review of a manga, and like the characters in the story, I'm gonna have to deal with the consequences of my actions when it comes to giving an unfavorable review, as this is the first time I've had experienced such a thing. So those are my thoughts on the manga Happiness. In the comments below, would you mind letting me know what you thought about the manga Happiness? And if you'd like to see more content like this, and you've not done so already, would you like, comment, and subscribe to the channel? That helps others know about our thriving community that we are building together. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.